Hello and welcome to AI Mistakes. Today, we're talking about what happens when the bots outnumber the humans. Well, this is a fascinating conversation, and I want to bring you into my world of thinking about what's happening with AI. We've seen some pretty interesting numbers already in the world of AI. What do I mean? When we look at the growth, we've already seen that by 2030, the global AI market is expected to reach into the trillions of dollars. That is a huge, huge number. But with all this growth, what's going to happen next? I mean, we've seen the proliferation of AI. It's coming to us in many different ways. Some are good and some are not so good. And it's got me asking, what's going to happen next? I mean, with the advancement of AI, it's improving in its ability to get work done, in its understanding and its capability. Sometimes it really does feel like it's everywhere. And the truth is, it's in many places. It's proliferated so widely that oftentimes we don't even realize how widely available it has become. You can have an interaction with an AI agent and it's no longer novel. That's where we're headed. When we looked at these elements of what is an AI agent last week, we talked about that any AI system that can act in an autonomous way to manipulate its environment or conduct research, where it's able to compare multiple different options, consider different scenarios, make decisions, that is an AI agent. And what we are seeing is the application of these principles to get real work done. And as we look at what's possible, we begin to see that perhaps this is not such a great idea. In fact, there are many folks out there that are deeply afraid of what could happen with the advent of AGI or super intelligence, which is the at scale version of AGI, because there are some today that say we've already established this level of artificial general intelligence where it is roughly equivalent in intelligence to a human being. And I think that there are definitely places where it can do some really amazing things. There's still some places where it's not quite there. You know, if you are able to narrowly focus the capabilities of an AI agent, it is possible to do some pretty fascinating things. I get to work with this technology every day, and I get to see those things that are shared out on the great wide internet. X is a very, very interesting place to learn about AI. There's always something new. Every day, there's a new capability that gets announced or shared or talked about. Research papers are being published so often now that it's not actually possible for a single human to parse all of the research that is being published. And there are more and more trends that are developing this capability to do very purpose driven things. Because the truth is, it's not reliable. And the only way you can get anything useful is to be very narrowly focused. So, where does that leave us? Because I think as we are growing this concept of an AI agent, we are going to reach a point where AI agents actually outnumber humans. And then what? What do we do? We have this concept that I'd like to borrow. I came across this concept all the way back in 2005 or 2006, probably, when I was completing my undergraduate education. One of my favorite courses in the curriculum was on emerging technology. And we talked about this concept of gray goo in the course. And this actually came to us from a totally different place. I mean, where I came across this topic was in Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is near, but he was not the one to introduce the concept. He introduced it to me, but actually it was Eric Drexler all the way back in 1986 in his book, The Engines of Creation. He was basically drawing out a hypothetical global catastrophic scenario where you took this nano technology, and part of the fundamental premise here was that you were creating self-replicating technology. So essentially you would create a nanobot, and that nanobot would have the ability to create another nanobot. So this concept of gray goo was essentially a simple thought experiment, but a doomsday scenario where essentially, because of the powers of exponential growth, you could essentially create a scenario where they are able to replicate beyond your ability to control them. And it happens so fast, you don't even realize it before it's too late because of the numbers that are involved. If you took a nanobot and replicated it, that's one replication. If you did that again, it's exponential growth. So you'd get from 1 to 4 in only 2 generations. Well, if you keep going, you're familiar with the concept of exponential growth. The growth starts out really nice and even, and then it dramatically goes up. Well, if you do this with self-replicating technology, the moment from when you realized you made a mistake to the moment when they've occupied all available space is so short in time that it's essentially impossible for us to do anything about it. And so this triggered a thought experiment for me. What if we are creating a scenario of exponential growth for AI agents? I mean, it is possible as we continue to grow this technology that it's able to grow so fast that it gets out of control. Now, there are several philosophical questions that are out there that I think are kind of interesting. The other well-known one as it pertains to artificial intelligence is Nick Bostrom's paperclip. And when we talk about the paperclip maker, it is this concept of essentially being able to create an AI that's going to create paperclips. And it gets to be so good at making the paperclip that it reaches a limitation. It is so big that we cannot control it. And so it got me thinking, what about this situation where the AI grows out of our ability to control it anymore? And then I started looking for patterns of where people are taking action to either facilitate or discourage this sort of runaway growth scenario. And the very first thing I came across was Sam Altman's $7 trillion AI infrastructure program. And it dawned on me that Sam is looking ahead at what's possible. There is this unlimited growth phase that we're in. And so I thought I'd take a few minutes to kind of talk through that scenario with you a little bit. When we look at all of the things that could happen, all of the possible outcomes going forward, what would drive Sam Altman to build this scenario? And I think, the good news and the bad news here is that we have visionaries, people that have thought through the plan to a very substantial degree. But if you go back to that original idea of gray goo, right? And what that means, we're talking about an exponential growth. We're talking about things that grow so fast that we cannot possibly keep up with them. I mean, when we look at the growth of AI and how fast it is growing, there's a lot of people that are working on these capabilities and how to apply them in daily scenarios. And what you have is where people are taking all of what they've already solved and they're trying to apply it at scale, because that's what's necessary to grow these very large organizations. In fact, the prognostication that we'll have our first $1 billion company with a single human being is this growth forecast where things grow so quickly that it's possible for one person to do all of that. When we look at Nick Bostrom's concept and how it learns and adapts, it is continually optimizing itself. And so when you take the concept of a single human being growing a company in the billions of dollars, the only way that that's really possible is that it continues to learn and grow on its own. It's a self-optimizing system. And so where the fear comes in are people are wondering, when do we reach this inflection point of when it becomes not possible for a human to coexist with these principles and these concepts? And that's where the two ideas really cross, because when you look at the concept of gray goo, it's too late for you to do anything about. So how do we prevent this scenario? Well, I think there's a couple of things that are running through my mind. And I think where I am on this today is that it's not possible today for us to have a gray goo scenario with AI agents. And so in many ways, the fear that some folks are creating around superintelligence is really a bit irrational. I mean, look, I'm a data center guy. I've spent a good portion of my career building out the systems that run all of the compute power that we have today. And you need four things, actually five, depending on your perspective of things. But power really covers two of those elements. But you have to have power, right? Because all of these computers need some kind of power. Now, there are some very big forecasts out there on the growth of solar and battery power. I'm actually kind of a fan of some of the things I've read from some really big thinkers that are out there. And when you look at the projections of combining solar and battery, we might actually be able to grow things to a level that stays ahead of the forecast for the need. But the trick is, it's not enough to have the power for the compute, because these things get really hot. I spent a lot of time in the data center, walking around, racking servers, organizing and building out infrastructure for very large computational projects. Computers that do all of the essential things that a modern corporation needs. There's a lot involved in making that happen. And these are the four elements that enable that. But you have to have all four of these, and you have to keep them cool, because computers generate a lot of heat. In fact, it's not just the computers, but the networking equipment and the storage equipment. They effectively all generate heat, and you have to remove that heat or things start to break. In fact, not only do you need to remove the heat, but you have to remove the moisture, because computers and moisture are also not really good friends. Now, this has evolved to the level today that the most modern systems, like the more recently announced system by NVIDIA, they're high-end, cutting-edge new chips need so much cooling that they have actually switched the entire infrastructure to leverage a cooling system that is directly built in. It's no longer using air. It's using some form of liquid to keep the systems cool. Things have advanced to such a degree that you have to run the power and the cooling through the system simultaneously to keep things in balance. And so what does this mean for us in terms of the unlimited growth potential of artificial intelligence? We build these systems that are bigger and bigger, and companies are setting records with how large they're able to build these AI systems. But it does take a lot of manpower to build them. Now, there are some things that are evolving today, right? The use of generative AI to control robots. So if you're able to create a physical instantiation of AI that could rack and stack the servers or build the data centers, for example, that's one constraint that has to be overcome. And that's kind of where Nick's philosophy of building a factory that's able to self-optimize, you give it a goal and it's able to go and do that. I think that we will reasonably see a lot of construction work done by robotics controlled through the power of generative AI. And over time, these systems get better and better. But I think the biggest thing in my mind right now is that there are real limitations to what's possible. And there are forces out there that are trying to counteract that. They're trying to build these systems. But I think it's really unrealistic to be concerned about super intelligence. That's not the biggest problem that we're going to have because there are limitations. It is the growth that's going to happen. But not only do we need to be concerned about the growth that can happen and the limitations to that growth, I think we need to be realistic about the time frame of that growth and what is actually healthy for our human existence. Because the truth is, we've seen this pattern before. What do I mean? We have seen what happens to society, to the human existence, to our coexistence with technology when things grow far too fast. If you look back over the history of technology, you see this pattern again and again. And so I want to highlight that this is not a new thing, and we need to be careful. We need to be aware of both the fast growth and the fast support and the ramifications of growing too quickly. Where this pattern is often reconciled to our human existence is where humans intersect with the cycle. And that's typically through economics. In the 1920s, we had a very strong growth cycle and a very strong bust cycle. And people were deeply affected by the cycles. And so the big thinkers are looking at how do we enable this continuous growth and take full advantage of the AI capabilities across the physical and the computer-based virtual AI agents. And many of them have come to the conclusion that where we're headed is that we need some sort of universal basic income to provide for the fundamentals, our well-being, and make sure that the humans are taken care of across the board. And while I think that there are some noble thinkers out there that really are trying to provide a safety net, a support mechanism for society, the problems are never quite that simple. I can honestly tell you that I like the idea of UBI in terms of a safety net, but there are problems involved because we're dealing with humans. The way that we act oftentimes is very irrational. Now, I'm going to maintain hope that we'll find a way to solve both problems, that will enable ourselves to scale new technologies in ways that we've never been able to before, and to do so in a way that is supportive and helpful to every human being that's involved. I just know that when you give someone a wad of dollars, if they didn't earn it, it doesn't go well. It doesn't really matter how much it is because we tend to do those things that we care about the most, and that's not always taking care of ourselves or each other. From a technological perspective, I wanted to draw a parallel to something I read most recently. Uh, you might say that I'm a bit of a follower of Mark Andreessen because I've really followed his work throughout my entire career. When I was an undergrad student, really my focus in development and capability and technology was the internet. I learned all about what it took to interconnect systems, what the cutting edge of internet connectivity was. I learned all about running a network and building it out and managing it and architecting it because that was the building block of the internet. I also learned about systems that connected and did work on the internet. And Mark Andreessen was a big part of that story because he was connected to Netscape. And Netscape was my first experience with a browser. Mosaic was, in fact, the first browser that was out there, but Netscape is what did it for me. It's what opened that door to let me see the great wide internet. And of course, Microsoft was a part of that story too. But there's still a lot of very fond memories for me of that first time connecting the modem to the internet and using Netscape to access a website. That you hold on to that, and for everyone that story is a bit different. But Mark Andreessen shared this story, and I hadn't come across this. I wasn't, look, I was tied into internet news and I read things, but the Wall Street Journal was not one of those for me when I was in those college days. Yeah, it just wasn't something that I spent my time on. I was much more interested in the technology and developing applications, writing code, building systems. That's what occupied a lot of my time. So I had not come across this article until Mark shared it, and he took a couple of screenshots. I'm not going to cover the whole story here. I'll put a link to the thread in the comments below the video if you're interested and want to pull up that tweet and read through it. But I'm going to kind of summarize it for you right now. The essence of what he shared was actually what drove the growth of telecom in the internet boom time frame, the 1990 to 2000 space and time. What really was enabling the future of the internet was you had to have all of this network connectivity to make it happen. And it turns out that there was a lot of artificial growth that was taking place because there were companies that were getting investment dollars, that were getting popular on the stock market because they were forecasting these incredible growth numbers. Unfortunately, the growth numbers that they were forecasting were 100% fabricated. They were not real. The 1,000% growth was not real. It didn't happen. It was entirely made up. And that's ultimately what led to the collapse of MCI WorldCom because the numbers were fake. What wasn't fake was the build out of all of the network connectivity, the fiber optic connectors, the networking stocks, all of those things that made the underpinnings of the network possible, the infrastructure, were things that were driven by this cycle that was artificial. Now, who am I to say what is real and what's not? Look, we're in the age of fake news, but that happened before as well. It turns out that there was an organization that came along and made up their growth numbers, and that's what led to an incredible glut of fiber. Now, we've benefited today by all of the fiber optic build out, but we had a boom and we had a bust, and it was bad for quite a long time. In fact, I was directly affected by that bust cycle as well, because when I went into college, it was the heyday of the internet. Internet startups all over the place. I'll have no trouble finding a job. This is the latest and greatest in-demand thing. Everybody wants to build something on the internet. And in the intervening years, the story changed dramatically because of the boom and bust cycle. So while I'm excited about the future and the advent of AI and what's possible, I also want to call out that we need to be cautious. We need to be aware that we can go too far, too fast, and build far too much, and do it in a time frame that's completely unrealistic. We need to be aware of building sustainable growth for ourselves in our careers and the way that we're leveraging this technology and for the rest of society so that we can do what's best for us across the board. Because oftentimes, if we're not paying close attention to it, we're not doing what's best for us. And so that's this week's AI mistake. Don't overestimate the capability of AI. Don't overestimate how quickly it will grow, but try not to underestimate it either. There are those that are out there in these forces. And if you are a decision maker for your company, if you are building a business, it is important to be able to connect to these trends and build what's needed in just the right moment. Just be sure to keep an eye on that steady growth, because as soon as you depart from that steady growth, we get into these pockets of boom and bust, and that's not the best for us. So let's be realistic. Let's continue to grow our own abilities to use this technology and do it in a way that benefits everybody. I think the biggest lesson that I have learned so far from my study of these topics is that it is possible to grow this in a sustainable way, to adopt these practices and capabilities in a way that benefits everyone involved, and we can really help each other. And the way that we do that is to go and make some AI mistakes. What are you playing with? What are you working on to use AI to make your life better or to improve the services that are conducted? There's a lot of ways that we can do this wrong. And I'm going to continue to dive deep into the AI mistakes that are out there so that we can all learn from them and grow and build a better tomorrow, because we all want AI that's going to help us do the big things, but also take care of our fellow human beings. Look, there's a lot of news out there right now about how there's need and how we can help each other. And I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves is really strive to connect with those people that are around us. So my call to action is, what are you working on? What is it that you want to make happen? Right? And then before we close today, I'm open to any questions you may have. By all means, what are the things that you're curious about? What kind of AI mistakes are you worried about? What AI mistakes are you making? Because at the end of the day, it's about going to make those AI mistakes. And if we don't have any questions out there on the chat, I want to appreciate you for joining me live tonight and look forward to seeing you again. Let's go make some AI mistakes. See you next time.